The number of confirmed cases across the world quickly rises.
We all need to take steps to reduce close human contact.
You are not immune. People should stay indoors and stay safe.
Look out for yourself.
Hey guys, welcome to Chapter 1, Section 1. So this is the unborn truth, and I thought, how do I communicate all of this content in the best possible way to you guys? Because there's lots of info coming your way, and I don't want to overload anything with information. I don't want to be mixing these different concepts and explanations wildly while teaching these licks. So I thought it would probably be best if we concentrate on the how and what, so the notes and the techniques first, and then after that is cleared up, we will move on to the why, to the thought processes and the concepts that led to me writing this guitar solo the way that you just heard it. So let's get started with the first part. Basically, this entire section, even though there's multiple notes going on at the same time, and it is rather complicated in how the harmony develops, it's very simple at heart, because the core of it is just a very simple rhythmic melodic idea, which is, that's the basic idea. Bop, 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 bop. Super simple 8-note, 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 quarter note, 8-note, 8-note, 8-note rhythm. And that is taken straight out of the chorus, because there's a vocal melody that uses that rhythm. And also underneath the guitar solo, now we have straight 8 notes playing in a kick drum and the rhythm guitar. So that's already happening all over the place, and we just take advantage of what's already there. Super simple. And the way I arrange this on the guitar in its simplest form is this. We have a lower note and a higher note. And we go from the lower note, which we strike with a downstroke, to the higher note with a hammer on. So in this case, C and D, 13th fret to 15th fret, striking the 13th fret, hammering onto the 15th fret, then down, up strokes on the 15th fret, and then up, down, up on that higher note. So that is the basis of what's about to come. So now we will be moving this tiny little idea throughout the D minor scale. So that is D, E, F, G, A, B flat, C, and D. And we will be ascending first for a couple of bars and playing a few variations on that little melodic theme, and then descending. So the the ascending part starts like this. Right? Those are the first 4 bars. And hopefully you can tell that even though I just said it is in the scale of D minor, I'm not starting on a note within that scale. Instead, I'm starting on a G sharp, 13th fret on the G string. And the reason for that is, I guess, of personal nature, because I just like to obscure things that are too obvious harmonically for my personal taste. So the first note in the scale would be A, which is the perfect fifth to D. To me, that's a little bit too on the nose. That's a little bit too obvious. So in those cases, I really like obscuring and embellishing these simple chord tones, if you will, with chromatic neighboring tones. I do that all the time in my playing through things like that. But in this case, it's just this one simple neighboring tone from A, just G sharp. And it happens on the one that is the first note that the listener hears when the guitar solo starts. So it's like throwing the listener a little curveball right at the beginning, making him think, what is this going to be? Where is this going? Is this even right? So those are like little things that I really like throwing in all the time to give the whole thing a little bit more edge and a little bit more personality. So then it continues, this G sharp to A twice. Then we go to the B string, 13 to 15 fret, like in our example. One time, and then 15 to 17 fret, D to E, one time. And those are the first 4 bars. Right, then the next section, there will be a little variation on the core idea, which is... So now we're making this 1-bar phrase to a 2-bar phrase. So it goes from D on the 15th fret to F on the 18th fret. So D with a downstroke, hammer on to F, 18th fret, 2 more notes, 2 more down, 1 down and 1 upstroke, and then up, down, up on the F. That's bar 1, and then bar 2 is the reverse. So 1 downstroke on the F, pull off to D, down, up, down, up. Together that makes. And then we repeat that, but instead of ending on D, we will be ending on E. So it is D to F once again. And now in the second bar, it's F to E. So, and that section in total will be. Right. So then the next section of the melody goes back to a 1-bar phrase, which is repeated 2 times. And this time the rhythm changes really slightly just by avoiding that last note. So it's going to be which is G on the 20th fret to F, 18th fret. Down, up on G, down, up on F. 2 times. And don't you worry if I sometimes do the opposite picking pattern just because I don't notice, because I have this habit of starting phrases on either down or upstrokes. I don't have a set way of going about these things. And I will talk about that and what advantages and disadvantages it has further on in the course. But yeah, then it continues with the same pattern, the same idea, but we will be swapping out the G for an A on the 22nd fret of the B string. So down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. So that is the highest point in the melody, and now the descending part begins, which will be starting on the F, 18th fret, and it will be a 4-note sequence, meaning that we will have a little melody comprised of 4 notes played in always the same way, but then we move that little sequence to different scale degrees. So we start on F with a downstroke, and then we slide down to E, 17th fret, and then play that down and up. So that makes 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that becomes our little sequence, which we then repeat between E and D. E with a downstroke, slide down to D, 15th fret, down, up. Then between D and B flat, so D, 15th fret, with a downstroke, slide down to the 11th fret, B, which is B flat, and then down, up. And then one more time, the sequence repeats between B flat and A on the 10th fret. So B flat, 11th fret, slide down to A, 10th fret, down, up. And in total that makes... And then finally we play on that A, we stay on that A note, we play the like a resurgence of the initial rhythmic idea. So the original idea comes back, ba, 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 one note omitted, and then for the final bar it's just half note, half note. So downstroke, downstroke. So now that is the entire melody, which goes. There you go. So now let's bring in those other tones that we have not been talking about so far. And what's going to happen first is that we are bringing in the open D string as a pedal point. And if you don't know what a pedal point is, just listen to this example really quickly. So you can hear that we have one voice, one melody, one upper melody, in this case G, that is remaining stationary. And then we have one lower melody that is moving from note to note. So that is the concept of pedal points. Several melodies at once, one is remaining stationary and the other one is moving around. In our case, D will remain where it is throughout this entire lick, and then the higher melody obviously is moving around. So what happens is that every time we go to a different note in that key of D minor, then it will create different intervals between D and that melody tone. Like for example, here we have a perfect fifth between D and A, but now we have a minor seventh between D and C, which sounds a lot more spicy and dissonant. And now we can create a lot of tension and release by moving the melody against that pedal point. Sorry. Right, just as an example. And one of the things I do to play things like that is that I would always, when using a distortion sound, go to split position, right? Because the basic humbucker sound has too thick a sound, in my opinion, to get those spicy intervals to sound right, and it doesn't have the clarity that the split position has. So that's why I'm playing this entire section basically on the split position of this humbucker. And we're not done yet, because we have one more, as I call it, voice to insert into this lick. So if the D is our lowest voice, which remains stationary, and that becomes our highest voice, which moves around the most, then we will have a middle voice in between, which does move, but doesn't move as often. So when we do that, though, one thing to keep in mind is that we do not want to hit the listener over the head with a big amount of information right away. We want to lead him into this idea gently. So for this reason, and also for guitar playing convenience, I'm going to start playing just two melodies in the first two bars. So it's just going to be D and then the G sharp and A. And then I will keep fretting that A note and then move my index finger to the B string, to the 13th fret. And now we have three parts. We have 1, 2, 3 notes going on at the same time. And then that C will stay where it is. and I will hammer on the 15th fret on the D, the ring finger. And then for the next bar, I will remain this ring finger where it is, and then bring in the pinky as a hammer on. So. And that is the beginning. So you can see that I need a little bit of a different angle in the right hand to do this. When you're just playing up and down on a single string, you can get away with very small movements. But now if you're playing 3 or at the very end 4 strings at the same time, then you just need a very different kind of movement. Still up and down, but you have to do this sort of pendulum swing, right? Where wrist goes up here, wrist goes down, wrist goes up. So that is the movement that you need to have. And you may have noticed that I'm using my pinky here to touch the high E string throughout this entire lick. And the reason for that is just because I do not want this E note to sound until the very 2 last bars. And I want to make sure that I don't accidentally hit it with the pick, right? Because I'm doing these wider movements now with the right hand. And so if you can see how that works, I can still move around with my hand. I can still do the pendulum, but I don't have to worry about hitting the E string anymore. So now that is all cleared up. Now let's go into the next section of the lick, or the next couple of bars. So now this is where the advantage of this approach really becomes apparent, because now we can play something like D to B flat to F, and then D to B flat to E at the same time. So we have this super rich, spicy harmony, but we're still in the key of D minor. So we're not moving outside of the key. We're not bringing in some super esoteric, jazzy harmony. We are staying in the parent scale the entire time, but we can still create these very tense moments. And we can create tension and then release within the scale without having really to do too much in terms of theoretical thinking. And I think that is reason enough to try this pedal point approach for yourself. So anyway, when we get into this bar, then for the first time this middle voice moves, and it moves upwards from A, 14th fret, to B flat, 15th fret on the G string. And so now we will be moving our hand backwards a little bit, because that enables us to have this index finger as a barré or bar. Don't know how you guys pronounce that. As a bar throughout this entire little mini section, right? Moving the hand backwards, like moving the elbow backwards, basically pushes the index finger against multiple strings at once, and also against the high E string, but that is obviously not a problem since we're using our pinky here to keep that in check. Right? And we will be fretting that throughout these entire 2 bars, or 4 bars really. Nice. How that tension just hangs in the air. So now, in the next little mini section, we will be moving up, that middle voice from B flat to C. So now it's D against C against first G and then F. Another spicy but less tense little harmony here. Right? And then once again between D, C, A, and F. And that is the point where we go into the descending. And now one other thing that we can use this middle voice for is that we can control the feeling that the listener has of movement and of intensity. So since the beginning of this lick, we had been changing this middle voice note only at the beginning of sections or at the beginning of bars. But now what's going to happen is that we will be moving this middle voice every 4 8 notes, so half a bar. And even though the rhythm doesn't change and we're not doing anything terribly different, because now this harmony changes so much more frequently, the listener's perception is one of acceleration, because there's things are happening at a quicker rate. And this is a super convenient trick to control the sense of the listener for what is happening, how quickly things are progressing. So in my case, I want to create this feeling of acceleration towards the ending of that whole section, right? I want to increase the pressure and then to release it at the end. And so what we are going to do to achieve this is we are starting from D to C to F. So these are the first 4 notes. So we play C again on the 17th fret and then 18th fret F here with the middle finger. So now first of all, the F is supposed to be sliding down to E. That's a bit of a problem because I can't just, without changing anything in the hand itself, I can't just bring that finger underneath, or it's very uncomfortable and difficult. But then if we slide our entire arm around upwards, shoulder goes upwards, so that this joint here is hitting the fretboard or the underside of the fretboard, then my index finger goes out of the way of the middle finger a little bit, and both of these will fit nicely on the same fret in different strings. So that's the first 4 notes. And now we move both of those to the 14th and 15th fret on G and B string. So that may take some getting used to, sliding from the same fret here to different frets. In this case, a whole step and 1.5 steps. And like I brought up my hand just a moment ago, now I have to bring down the hand again to make this possible. Right? Once again. Very intricate, convenient little trick there with the movement of the hands. Right, and then again we will be moving 4 notes later. So from 14th and 15th fret, we're now moving to 10th and 11th, which is a lot easier to do. And then from that to 9th and 10th. Right. And then for the last 2 bars, I'm removing the pinky and I'm basically repeating that opening rhythm. But now this is the first point where we have 4 notes happening. D, E, A, and another E. And then, right, so I can hope you can hear the sense of movement and anticipation that I'm creating by increasing the frequency of these changes in the middle voice. But then also the sense of resolution. At the end. And that is really the whole thing. It's really an interesting and very beneficial way to create these peaks and valleys of a melody and of a musical phrase all by yourself as the guitar player, even though the basic harmony and the root notes don't change. So you're not completely reliant on what is happening in the band to create these peaks and valleys and these plateaus of anticipation and these plateaus of resolution. So that's something that I really like to do, to be mindful of what's happening in the band, in the backing track, but also independent in my decision making. All right, then let's talk about what's going on beneath the hood, so to speak. The first thought that I think every soloist should have when creating a guitar solo for any track in any kind of genre is, what are the circumstances? What is the song about? And what is the place of the guitar solo within the song? So just to give you an example here in this track, it's a over 5 minute long song and it's very technical, it's very demanding to play, and there's loads of information going on throughout the entire tune. And the guitar solo is not in the middle section, it's at the end. So if you listen to how the track develops, which you will be able to do once I upload the full playthrough video after we went through all the sections, then you hear that there are multiple high points, multiple climax moments, so to speak, throughout the song. But the guitar solo at the end is not that big one climax moment with the most information, right? Because that is very often the case with guitar solos, that they provide a sort of climax in the middle of the song. And in this case, it's really not. It's made to, or let me phrase it a different way. It's coming after the biggest section. So we have 3 chorus parts, and then obviously with a good chorus, the last chorus, the final one, should always be the biggest one. So we have the biggest section, the final chorus, and then the guitar solo follows along and leads us out of the song. It's basically the outro. So that changes things a lot. That changes the decision making, right? Because then if you are creating a guitar solo at the end that is trying to compete with the bigness, with the intensity of that chorus, you can very easily destroy the flow of the song, right? Sometimes that can work, but more often than not, it's not a good idea. So in this case, my decision making was really based on where in the song the solo is happening and what the purpose was. So what can I do in this guitar solo that aids the song and that will honor its place in the song structure? So this being the outro, and being that this happens after the final chorus, I thought it would be the best if I take musical material from the chorus, from the vocal melodies, and from what's happening in the backing track and really construct a solo around that. And that led to it being not a shred solo at all, having little to no really fast bits past the 16th note point. And that was really the best way to make sure that we don't overshadow the chorus, but that we keep up the intensity, that the chorus built and hold it for a while longer until we finally release it in that cathartic last D note at the end. So that is basically what's happening, because we could also, from a songwriting perspective, do without that final part. So we could just have the final chorus and then go into that final D note right after. The song would still work. So now the question is, if we have that outro part, what can we do to fill the space conveniently without overshadowing the climax point, which is the chorus? And that is what led me to have this idea of creating this very simple melody, but having multiple notes at the same time, basically playing chords. Because if you listen to the recorded version of the song, obviously you have vocal harmonies and this chorus is very big. So now what happens when you go from a chorus that has multiple voices going on at the same time, and then you go to one guitar which plays just one note at a time, then, well, certainly you can produce it and mix it in a way that the guitar sounds huge, but just in terms of how much information is being presented to the listener, it's going to feel like a step down. It's going to feel like a letdown. So my thought process was that I could create a solo, especially in that first section, that is not a letdown in that way, that has these multiple voices going on at the same time. So it sounds huge to begin with, but it doesn't create a hectic flow, right? So there's at the beginning there's only 8 notes, and even later there's 16 notes at the most for short periods of time. So we are honoring the frequency with which things are progressing with this solo, hopefully. But at the same time, we are keeping in mind that we need to keep up the level of bigness. Sounds kind of cheesy to say it like that, but I think you know what I'm trying to say here, right? So the amount of information happening vertically is preserved, and that is a convenient way for me to lead out of the chorus section with the same amount of density, and then have things go in a little bit more playful way for a moment before we then collapse into that final D note at the end. Right, so that was really the decision making, and I can only encourage you guys to really think about what the purpose of each guitar solo is. Where in the track does it sit? What is it trying to say, right? Is it providing a relief from the intensity that's happening around the guitar solo section? Or is it bringing that intensity? Is it that one part that supposed to have that intensity? Or is it somewhere in between? There's so many different forms of songs, so that you can do quite a few different things with guitar solos, fortunately. But at the same time, you need to be aware of why you are doing these things. You need to be aware of why you go for a certain, amount of notes in the solo, and why you go for something with less. You can't just go over these things the same time, every time. And I'll tell you a story. When I was starting out as a lead guitar player, I was recording guitar solos, and I didn't think it was really my strongest point as a musician. I didn't really know how to create good guitar solos. And in hindsight, I later found out where my problem was. The problem was not that I wasn't good enough as a player, because I had the technique, I had the chops, and I had loads of tricks that I could pull off. But the problem was that every time I would play a solo, I would try to cram everything at my disposal into each solo. So every solo would sound the same to somebody who would not be playing guitar, right? To a non-guitar person, it was just a bunch of notes, right, put into this guitar solo part with no rhyme or reason. And it would satisfy my ego, because I could put all my best tricks into that solo. But then, the question was always, why? Why is this solo the way it is? Because it doesn't really relate to the song itself. And I think I changed that quite a bit in recent years. But just as an example, this is what you want to be thinking about. Where is the solo going? What's its place in the bigger context? What is the song trying to say? And how can my guitar solo help in creating that flow that the artist or the writer has envisioned for the song, right? And that's it for today. That's it for this episode. I'll be seeing you in the next section.